Ladies and gentlemen, sons and daughters of the kingdom, I bring you a message today, not from my own thinking but from the Spirit. God is supporting your life, so stop worrying. The issue isn't a lack of resources. The issue is a lack of understanding. God never starts anything unless He's already finished it. So if you are walking in an assignment from heaven, the provision isn't on the way, it's already set. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That means He approved the full plan before you even took your first breath. You don't have to beg for what's already been accepted. You don't need to worry about what's already been released. What you truly need is alignment, because provision responds to position. When you stand in the place you're meant to be, you'll discover what's been waiting for you the whole time. If God gave you the vision, He already provided the supply. This is not just a nice saying, it's a spiritual truth. Heaven doesn't give out assignments without also giving out the needed resources. When God places a word in your heart, that word isn't empty, it comes packed with power, direction, and supply. That very instruction carries the strength to make itself happen. God never asks you to move without already putting the support in your future. You're not walking into confusion, you're walking into purpose. You're not begging for what you need, you're simply uncovering what's already stored for you. Provision in God's kingdom isn't something you chase, it's something you recognize. You don't need to trick your way into resources or struggle to fund a divine assignment. You don't need to persuade anyone to support what God already decided in eternity. When God calls someone, He also provides for that calling. If God truly assigned you, then you are already equipped with unseen deposits that will show up when you act in obedience. You are not lacking, you've already been loaded with everything needed to complete your mission. Heaven has already released the support, your faith only needs to reach for it. When God told Noah to build an ark, there was no hardware store nearby, but everything he needed was already around him. The trees held the wood. The plan was in God's mind. The favor was resting on Noah. What made it all come together? Obedience. The second Noah agreed to the task, the supply was activated. The materials didn't show up first, the call came first. Why? Because God doesn't support disobedience, He supports purpose. And purpose doesn't need to be convinced to show up, it only needs to be followed. Think about Abraham. God said, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's house and go to the land I will show you." There was no financial plan, no roadmap, no travel schedule, but there was a promise. And that promise was the start of his supply. As Abraham moved, doors opened. As Abraham obeyed, blessings came. He met kings who handed him gold, cattle, and land. He found wells in dry places. He came across divine connections not because he had a master plan, but because he had a word. And when you have a word from God, all of heaven's power supports it. Angels are sent, favor is prepared, and provision is moved into position. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting for provision before starting their assignment. But God doesn't work by our time or our logic. His kingdom runs by faith. And faith is the currency that brings provision from the invisible into your hands. Faith doesn't wait to see the money in the account, it acts like it's already there. Faith doesn't wait for cheers, it builds while being laughed at. Because faith understands that God doesn't play games with His children. If He gave you the vision, He's already covered the cost. That's why we have to change how we think from pushing to trusting. You weren't created to worry about things God has already handled. Your job isn't to figure out every detail, it's to believe what He said. Some of the things you're praying for have already been given, they're just waiting for your movement. Provision often stands behind obedience. When Elijah followed God's direction and went to the brook, God had already told the ravens to feed him. Elijah didn't have to catch the birds, he just had to be there. The supply met him at the place of obedience. And when the brook dried up, God had already arranged for a widow in Zarephath to take care of him. Elijah's support moved with him because God's word is not tied to one source. We keep thinking we have to work or earn our way to provision. But in the kingdom, provision follows purpose like a shadow. You may not notice it until you walk toward the light. And the light is God's instruction. The more your life lines up with God's calling, the more you'll notice resources flowing your way, not because you're chasing them, but because they're drawn to you onto your calling. God isn't making up your life as you go. He's not shocked by your needs or unready for your future. Before you even arrived on this earth, He planned it all out. Before you saw the vision, He planted the provision. The reason you're still here, even after battles, losses, and dry seasons, is because heaven has been supporting you the whole time. You're not trying to be chosen, you were born chosen. That truth changes everything. In God's kingdom, identity isn't earned, it's inherited. You are not just another face in the crowd hoping God notices you. You are a divine solution sent into time with a mission wrapped in a name. Before you ever succeeded or stumbled, God had already marked you. And that mark, that identity, draws the resources of heaven to you. Provision doesn't answer to begging, it answers to identity. When you know who you are, the world around you shifts. Favor begins to come to you. Doors begin to open not because you forced them, but because they were meant for you. This is why the enemy doesn't go after your money, your connections, or your image first. He goes after your identity. Because if he can twist how you see yourself, he can delay your destiny. If you keep thinking you're just average, you'll keep attracting average provision. But once you understand that you are chosen, anointed, and appointed, you move into a place where supply flows not from effort, but from position. Sons and daughters in the kingdom don't struggle to survive, they live from inheritance. An inheritance is activated by identity. When Jesus was baptized, before he did any miracles or preached any sermons, God said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." That was not just for Jesus, it was a legal announcement to the earth and the spiritual realm. From that point, miracles started happening not because he tried harder, but because his identity was declared. Identity comes before influence. Identity comes before impact. Most importantly, identity comes before provision. So many people are chasing money, success, and relationships, thinking one day they'll be worthy of their dreams. But in the kingdom, you don't qualify by running after things, you qualify by waking up to who you already are. When you awaken to your true identity, heaven's supply begins to move for you. It's not magic, it's a spiritual law. You're not asking for something from outside of you. You're stepping into what was already placed inside you. The identity you carry comes with its own environment of resources. That's why Joseph, even while in prison, had favor. He never stopped being chosen. His identity didn't change because of his surroundings. He was still the dreamer. He was still the interpreter. And because he stayed true to what God called him, even Pharaoh had to make space for him. Joseph didn't scheme his way into the palace, his identity lifted him from the pit to the throne. And with that identity came authority, influence, and provision. We live in a world that constantly tells you to become rich, become powerful, become known. But God's kingdom says to remember who you are. You're not becoming chosen, you already are. You're not struggling to get God's attention, you already have it. You're not trying to break doors open, your name is already written on certain keys. But until you believe that, you'll live beneath what was promised to you. Provision is activated by your voice, but your real voice only rises when your real identity is revealed. That's why confusion about who you are creates confusion about what you're meant to do. You can't be clear about your mission if you're unclear about yourself. But once you understand who you are, a royal citizen, a kingdom agent, a divine representative, you begin to attract the resources assigned to your role. Why? Because provision follows the original design. When you live according to the blueprint God made for you, the supply becomes automatic. You're not chasing it, it's responding to your signal. Look at David. He was just a shepherd, invisible to people but fully seen by God. The moment he stepped onto the battlefield with Goliath, everything shifted. Why? Because he wasn't just holding a sling, he was holding identity. He knew he wasn't just a boy with a stone, he was a chosen one with a covenant. And because of that covenant, victory and promotion were sure. He didn't need armor. He didn't need applause. He only needed to walk in who he already was. When you truly understand who you are in God, what you carry, and the authority that stands behind you, you'll stop chasing after provision and start commanding it. Resources aren't hesitant to come, they're simply waiting for the real you to rise up. The you that isn't shaken by circumstances. The you that doesn't need approval from anyone. The you that knows heaven has already approved your assignment. And because of that identity, your destiny is not just possible, it's already covered. Worry is the enemy of trust in God's kingdom. It's not just a weakness or a natural reaction, it actually goes against divine order. When you worry, you step outside the limits of your kingdom citizenship. Worry is not allowed because it goes against the very heart of your relationship with the King. It suggests that the one who called you isn't able to carry you. It implies that your Father in heaven can't be trusted. And that's not just dangerous, it's disrespectful. Worry isn't harmless. It slowly eats away at your faith, breaks down your peace, and clouds your vision. It's not just a random habit, it's a dangerous belief that says God might not come through. But here's the truth, God has never failed. Not even once in all eternity. His record is perfect. So when someone in the kingdom chooses to worry, they aren't just feeling overwhelmed, they're out of alignment with their spiritual position. You can't claim to walk in kingdom authority and still think like someone who's been abandoned. Worry is the voice of people who don't realize they're protected. Jesus was very clear in the Sermon on the Mount. Do not worry about your life, about what you will eat, drink, or wear. That wasn't advice, it was a direct instruction. He didn't say try not to worry. He said do not worry. Why? Because worry is not allowed in the life of someone who knows who their Father is. Worry shows that you're trying to carry a load you were never built to handle. It means you've taken the driver's seat even though God already promised to lead. The kingdom is built on trust. And trust isn't just a feeling, it's a decision. It's a heart posture that says, even if I can't see the way, I know who is leading. You don't need to see the full picture to have peace. You only need to know the one who holds it all. When your confidence is rooted in the unshakable nature of God, worry becomes unnecessary. You can't live in fear and faith at the same time. You have to choose. In the kingdom, your legal position is rest, not stress. Worry often wears the disguise of responsibility. Many think that worrying shows they care or that they're being sensible. But caring and carrying are not the same. You were never meant to carry the weight of your life on your own. That's what the cross was for. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are tired and weighed down, and I will give you rest." Rest is your kingdom right. It's a sign of your trust. And rest is where revelation flows. You can't hear clearly from God when your mind is filled with the noise of worry. Anxiety blocks divine instruction. But peace makes room for wisdom. You can't walk in authority if you're bowing to anxiety. The two don't mix. Anxiety holds you back. Authority moves you forward. When you know who sent you, you stop stressing about what's standing in your way. Worry makes you a prisoner to what's happening around you. Trust makes you a carrier of peace. And peace is not just a calm feeling, it's a spiritual weapon. It confuses the enemy, crushes fear, and opens the door for the supernatural. Every time you choose worry instead of trust, you give up your inheritance for something fake. You act like a servant when God has called you a son. You panic like someone who doesn't belong when you are a full citizen of the kingdom. Worry doesn't just waste your energy, it's not authorized. It gives the enemy a space in your thoughts. But when you shut worry out, you invite divine answers in. Heaven responds to faith, not fear. Heaven releases provision in response to purpose, not panic. That's why the enemy tries to flood your mind with what-if questions. What if the money doesn't show up? What if the opportunity doesn't come? What if the health report gets worse? But those questions are powered by fear, not faith. Faith turns those questions around. What if God steps in suddenly? What if the breakthrough is already happening? What if the answer has already been released in the invisible realm and your trust is the key to unlocking it? You were never made to carry the weight of uncertainty. That's the King's role. He knows what you need before you even ask. He's seen the end from the beginning. He's not pacing in heaven trying to figure out how your life will turn out. He wrote the whole story. And since he wrote it, he's also responsible for finishing it. Worry happens when you forget that the author is also the finisher. Heaven's economy is never in recession. The earth may shake, but the throne of God is steady. Earth may have inflation, limits, and lack, but heaven is not ruled by human systems. God doesn't provide based on world conditions. He provides based on His promise. The kingdom of God isn't tied to interest rates or global markets. It's built on a covenant that has never changed since before the beginning of time. That covenant doesn't rise or fall with oil prices or election results. It doesn't shrink your future because of financial forecasts. When you're in covenant with God, your provision is secured by something greater than the world. It's secured by the King's word. The world talks about shortage. Heaven speaks abundance. The world says hold on tight, play it safe, and save what you can. But the kingdom says give, trust, and release. The world tells you that giving means you'll have less, but the kingdom says giving unlocks more. The world teaches you to store up because of fear. The kingdom teaches you to give out of faith. You can't live in supernatural supply while thinking with a survival mindset. You must look past earthly limits and connect with heaven's endless supply. When famine came during Isaac's time, people panicked and scattered. But Isaac planted in that same land during the famine, and that same year, he harvested 100-fold. Why? Because the covenant's economy is stronger than the crisis of the land. While others were shrinking back, the one with the covenant was moving forward. While others faced drought, Isaac enjoyed abundance. Not because of clever plans, but because of his covenant position. He carried the covenant, and that always has more weight than the climate around you. Your father owns all the cattle on the hills. He's not waiting for the economy to shift before he blesses you. He's not watching the weather before he sends his favor. He doesn't need a bank's approval to deposit blessings in your life. God doesn't ask the world how much He can give you. He gives based on your assignment and your identity. The flow of provision in your life is not about the economy, it's about the covenant. You need to remind yourself of this truth. Provision is not tied to seasons, it's supernatural. The same God who gave manna in the desert can bring ideas in a crisis. The same God who made water pour from a rock can bring solutions from your struggles. Lack doesn't scare Him. Closed doors don't stop Him. Drought doesn't slow Him down. He doesn't just create a path, He is the path. So when the world says there's not enough, heaven declares, I am more than enough. That's why kingdom people must be careful with the words they use. The world says, times are tough, but we say God is good. The world says, money's tight, but we say, God meets all our needs. The world says, better be careful, but we say, we walk by faith. You can't talk about shortage and expect overflow. Your words either agree with the world's limits or heaven's abundance, and heaven listens for agreement. When you speak in line with the covenant, you unlock what the covenant contains. Look at when Jesus fed the 5,000. The disciples saw not enough 5 loaves and 2 fish, but Jesus saw more than enough. Why? Because His focus was on the Father, not the fact. He didn't say, Lord, we're short on food. He lifted what He had and gave thanks. Gratitude is the language of those who live above circumstances. Gratitude invites miracles. Jesus didn't ask for extra, He blessed what was there, and it became more than enough. That's how heaven's economy works. It's not about how much you begin with, it's about who you trust it with. So when prices rise, don't panic. Remember your covenant. When the news says collapse, speak of God's supply. You are not held up by your job, you are held up by the provider. Your job is just a tool. God is the source. If that tool breaks, He'll hand you another. Because in the kingdom, supply follows purpose, not paychecks. And where purpose is active, supply always shows up. You weren't made to live within the limits of this world's economy. You're from another place. You are backed by heaven's treasury, and it never runs dry. Provision is hidden in obedience. In the kingdom, God doesn't always show you the whole plan before you start. He gives you the first step. It's not that He's holding something back, it's that He's shaping you. Obedience is more than just about doing right. It's about moving forward. It is how faith speaks to heaven and says, I trust you even when I don't understand you. When you obey, You're not just moving toward your future, you're opening the door to the help that's been waiting for you. God doesn't support fantasy, He supports obedience. The next step He gives always brings the next wave of what you need. We often want the help first, then we'll move. But God says move, and what you need will meet you there. Help is connected to obedience. It's tied to your purpose. That means if you delay, the help stays untouched. If you choose not to obey, the help goes a different way. But if you take that step, even if it doesn't make sense, you step right into a flow of heavenly supply that's been waiting for your yes. You'll never know what God has prepared for you on the other side of fear until you choose to walk through it in trust. When God told Abraham to go to a land He would show him, He didn't give him a map. He didn't explain the distance, the cost, or where the help would come from. He just said, "Go." That was the instruction. And Abraham's obedience to that one word began a journey that brought blessings to generations. Why? Because help shows up with movement. It comes in steps. As long as Abraham stayed put, nothing changed. But when he moved, the blessing moved too. Obedience brings motion in the spiritual world. We often want God to provide before we act. But God releases what we need through our steps of trust. You think about the widow in 1 Kings 17. She had just a little flour and oil left to cook one last meal for her and her son. But the prophet Elijah gave her a message from the Lord, "Make me a small cake first." That didn't seem reasonable. It even sounded selfish. But obedience doesn't always make sense, it leans on trust. She followed the instruction, and as a result, her flour never ran out. Her oil didn't dry up. Her whole household was fed through the famine. The miracle was already prepared, it was just hidden in her willingness to follow. Every time God gives a step to take, it's packed with help. You may not see the money, the support, or the people until you take the step, but once you do, the door opens. That's because your obedience shows that your heart is aligned with heaven, and heaven funds what agrees with its will. God doesn't owe support to our preferences, but He fully backs our purpose. And purpose is only fully lived out when there is obedience. Jesus told the servants at the wedding in Cana to fill jars with water. That didn't seem to solve their problem. They needed wine, not water. But they followed His word. And as they poured, the water turned into wine. Notice the miracle didn't happen when they asked questions. It happened when they obeyed. The change happened while they were doing what He said. Sometimes your biggest breakthrough is hidden inside one simple instruction. Your next level may not need more strength, it may need more surrender. Many people pray for more blessings, but God is waiting for more obedience. You can't skip the step and still expect the result. God isn't playing games with your life. He's building trust. He wants to see if you'll follow through even without all the details. Can you build the boat before the rain? Can you step into the river before it splits? Can you speak to dry bones before they move? That's the kind of trust that draws in heaven's help. Help doesn't come to watchers, it comes to walkers. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he walked on water. But if he had waited for the sea to become solid ground, he would have missed the miracle. The miracle came while he moved. That's how God works. He supplies the journey of faith, not the comfort zone. If you're waiting for full instructions, you might block full support. God gives enough to get going, and He adds more as you go. The next step may seem small, difficult, or strange, but if it's from God, it's packed with power. When you respect that instruction, you connect to a flow of help that was set up before you were born. The ones who are chosen by God live from a source, not from a paycheck. That's how people in the kingdom think. You were never created to depend only on a job, a title, or a position. Your worth is not connected to your salary, your status, or your resume. Those things can change, but your source does not. The moment you became God's child, you were linked to a heavenly supply line. This supply is untouched by economy crashes, job losses, or money struggles. Your job is a channel, it is not the source. And when you understand that, you stop worrying when one channel closes, because you know the source can open another one. The enemy wants you to believe that your supply depends on people and systems. He wants you to trust the paycheck and fear losing it. But in God's kingdom, Your help doesn't come from the job, it flows through the job. If God could feed Elijah with birds and keep him safe near a stream, then surely he can take care of you without needing approval from your boss or help from the government. When one stream dries up, God already has a new direction ready. The job may be a tool, but God is the one holding the tool. Those who know their source stay steady even when things around them shift. They don't fall apart when there's a layoff. They don't collapse when the budget is tight. Why? Because their peace was never in the paycheck, it was in God's promise. And the promise is this: my God will supply all your needs according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. That verse doesn't say he will provide based on your boss's mood, your side hustle, or your monthly sales. It says his riches in glory. That's your source. That's your support. That's your safety net. When you start walking as someone chosen by God, your view of money changes. You stop running after resources and start living on purpose. Because wherever there is purpose, there will always be provision. The calling attracts what's needed. When God gives the plan, he also brings the supply. But if you treat your job like your God, you will always be afraid of not having enough. You'll keep instead of giving. You'll worry instead of resting. You'll settle instead of trusting. But when you know God is your source, your attitude changes. You give with joy. You move with courage. You rest with peace. Because you understand you're not kept by people. You're cared for by the Creator. Jesus lived from the source. He didn't get a paycheck. He didn't run a business. He had no savings, but he always had what was needed. Whether it was food for crowds, tax money from a fish, or favor from strangers, Jesus walked in the flow of the Spirit, not in the systems of man. And that same Spirit lives in you. That same access is yours. You weren't born again to be a slave to this world's system. You were born again to live in God's economy. And in heaven, there is no shortage, no crisis, and no delay. You can't live like someone chosen while thinking like someone hired. Hired people wait for their wages. Chosen people walk in inheritance. Hired ones worry when the check is late. Chosen ones rest in promises that never fail. If the job ends, the inheritance continues. If the business fails, the supply doesn't stop. Because the source isn't a stream, it's a fountain. And it never runs out. Don't mix up the tool with the provider. Don't confuse the method with the master. That paycheck is just a delivery truck. But the one who designed your life is also the one funding it. And he isn't poor. He isn't stingy. He isn't worried. He owns everything, lacks nothing. Your job is not to obsess over the how. It's to trust the who. When your heart is fixed on the source, you stop being controlled by today's problems. You stop living in fear of what you might lose. You start living from a higher place. You begin to move in faith instead of freezing in doubt. Because you know deep down that the hand that called you is also the hand that will carry you. And no human plan can cancel what God has promised. So hear this: stop living like a beggar in your Father's kingdom. You are not just trying to survive. You were chosen to lead. You are not scraping for crumbs. You are fully covered. You are not begging for blessings. You are seated at the King's table. Your help is not coming from luck, hard labor, or random chances. It's coming from your connection to God. It's coming from the promise. It's coming from who you are in Him. God is not wondering whether to bless you. He already decided. The question isn't, will God provide? The real question is, will you trust Him enough to obey? Will you stop checking your wallet to measure your worth? Will you stop worshiping your job and start working your purpose? Will you shut down fear and rise up like a true citizen of heaven? Because the chosen don't wait on perfect timing, they move with trust. The chosen don't beg, they declare. The chosen don't panic, they worship. Why? Because we know where our help comes from. It's not from the economy. It's not from the paycheck. It's not from any system. Our help comes from the Lord, the one who made heaven and earth. You are chosen. You are called. And you are already provided for. Now live like it.